Are
So-
we ready to start?
Yes, we do have some members present in person, and if any more show up, I will let you know.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I would like to call the December 2nd, 2020 meeting of the TPA's Citizens Advisory Committee.
Ooh, it smells
Excuse me?
good, Jimmy.
What?
I've muted, there was an issue with somebody needing to be muted.
Oh, okay. The Palm Beach TPA is conducting this meeting both in person and virtually using the Zoom webinar platform. The TPA selected this platform because it does not require the public to purchase or download any additional software or equipment to attend this meeting. The public will have no discernible difference in their ability to watch the meeting from that of someone physically attending the meeting. Instructions to join this virtual meeting as well as contract information for a TPA staff member to assist you are provided in the published meeting agenda. Before we begin, I will summarize our public comment procedures for this virtual meeting. Written comments may be submitted online at the website provided in the agenda. Verbal comments may be made by a virtual attendee using the raise hand feature in the Zoom platform. Lastly, a verbal and or written comment may be provided by an in-person attendee submitting a comment card available at the welcome table. Staff, please call the roll so that we can establish a quorum.
Terry Brown. And then Terry, you will need to unmute.
I'm here.
Oh, sorry, Terry, I muted you. Try again.
Terry,
I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Mark Bruner,
Here.
Greg Fagan,
Here.
Michael Fitzpatrick,
Here.
Glenn Harvey,
here,
Jason Mankoff, Albert Richwagon, Ryan Rossi,
Here.
Paula Ryan, Myron Uman.
Here.
We do not have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
okay. Are there any, okay. Are there any requested modifications to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I will start with some and then Jason will have some as well. So, Mr. Chair, pursuant to state law, a quorum of the CAC must be physically present at the advertised meeting site in order to conduct the meeting and take action as a body. Due to a quorum not being present, the meeting will, I'm sorry, to clarify, due to a quorum not being present in person, the meeting will move forward as information only, with the committee able to provide staff feedback by consensus. Additionally, we will defer action items 1C, adoption of the October minutes, and 2A, election of 2021 officers to our January 13th meeting.
You have a highlighter.
Jason also has a modification to discuss.
Good afternoon, everyone. The modification that I'm recommending is to move the airport presentation, which is 3C, to the beginning to 3A. So the airport presentation will be first, and then that will be followed by the FEC passenger railway update, and then the obligated projects update. So my
Okay.
request is to move the airport to the first informational item.
Okay. Any other modifications?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So since we can't approve it, we could just accept it? The
You're not
modification?
adopting the modifications to the agenda. We're modifying the agenda and we're letting you know what the modifications are. So
Oh.
you can move on to the next item, which has been deferred to January 13th.
Right, okay. So there, okay. Um, Have any general comments been received?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I have no comments. Are there any if any member has a comment for the committee, please utilize the raise hand function of the Zoom platform to ask and be recognized. Then remember to unmute your microphone once you are recognized. Anybody have any comments? Seeing none, let's-
Mr. Chair, I do have that Mike Fitzpatrick would like to raise his hand, and I'm sorry, I should go over this for the members present in person. Jason, if I can borrow your tablet. So if you would like to raise your hand, if you're present in person on the tablet, on the bottom part, when you touch the screen, there's 3 dots that say more. When you click on that, there's a raised hand option.
okay.
And Mr. Chair, I do have that Mike Fitzpatrick has his hand raised.
Please, Mike.
Well, I'd just like some information on this not being present thing. So everybody that's here on Zoom doesn't count towards the quorum, is that correct?
That's correct. We need to have 6 members present in person. For the other meetings, in order for the members to be able to vote in a meeting, the members present in person needed to have a quorum here in person and allow the virtual members to actually join the meeting and attend virtually and vote and have a discussion.
So in these 9 months since COVID's been going on, nobody's figured out a way to make meetings work then without,
So
through Zoom?
for previous meetings, we did have an allowance by the governor's office that was Executive Order 20-69, if memory serves me correctly. That did permit us to have a hybrid meeting where members did not have to be present in person. That order expired at the end of November. And it was not extended. So
what-
because of that, the original Florida statute it takes precedence where you do have to be present in person in order.
So what you're saying in this time when COVID's kicked up again, the governor's office has not done anything to bring back this emergency. This is not considered an emergency time by the governor, is what you're
Permission
saying.
to be remote.
What I can tell you is that a new executive order was not issued for us that allows us to have members present virtually without a
Okay,
quorum being present in person.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other committee members has a comment?
I see no
Seeing-
other hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. CAC liaison report. Jason, would you please review the liaison's report?
Yes.
Are there any public comments on this item?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair. I will let you know once the item has been reviewed if any hands are raised.
Thank you.
Okay, for the liaison report for December 2nd, the first item we see here is the South Florida Transportation Summit. This will be a virtual summit that'll be held on December 9th to discuss South Florida's future transportation vision. And on the screen and in your packet, you'll see that there is a website to register. Next is the Florida Transportation Plan. The draft Florida Transportation Plan policy element is posted for review and public comment through December 13th, 2020. And there is a draft if you visit floridatransportationplan.com. Next is the project development public hearing. The FDOT is holding a virtual meeting on December 15th and in person and an in-person hearing on December 16th at the Lantana Road Public Library, 420 Lantana Road in Lake Worth. And this will be to discuss proposed improvements on I-95 and Lantana Road. For December TPA governing board meetings, the governing board meeting will be held on December 17th at 9 a.m. and it'll be both in person and virtually. January meetings, we will be having January meetings, and the TPA plans to hold the meetings as regularly scheduled. Let's see. Safe Street Summit. So we'll be hosting the Safe Street Summit this year. So the 2021 Safe Street Summit, it will be virtual, but we'll be the host. And that's on January 28th through the 29th. There's early bird registration that ends on December 18th. And the last day for registration is January 22nd, 2021. There's a few more here. The last one I'll go over is the Safe Routes to School. The Florida Safe Routes to School grant applications are due December 31st, 2020. And there's just a few more that you can go through at your leisure. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Marty, I'd like to raise my hand.
Okay, I was
Well,
just going
are
to
there
say
any-
that Mark raised his hand, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, I do not have any public comments on this item, but I do have that Mark has his hand raised.
Okay, Mark?
Mark, I'm sorry, can you turn your microphone on, hit the button so it's red? Thank you.
Okay, there it is. Yeah, this is in regard to item 5, January meetings. Again, just to clarify for myself, how many members constitute a quorum? And second in that question, the chair doesn't have to be one of the members that constitutes a quorum. Is that correct?
To answer the first question, right now, based on the members, the total makeup of the committee, we need six members present in person to constitute a quorum. The chair does make up one of those six.
So the chair would have to be here.
As long as it's 6 members, whether it's a chair, vice chair, general member, I need 6 of you present in person to constitute a quorum.
Okay, so 6 of us have to be here, but it doesn't the chair doesn't necessarily have to be one of those 6.
No.
Thank you. That's all I need to know.
Easy.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, I was going to say that Myron did have his hand raised, but then he lowered it
Okay,
and he's raised it again.
all right.
And also, I'm sorry, Jason did have a comment as well.
So there is one more item. I apologize for the liaison report. And that's the last item, the TPA committee census update. That's something that Melissa Booth will go over or make some comments on if she is present.
Yes, thank you very much, Jason. I hope everyone has safe and pleasant Thanksgiving holiday. Just to provide an update, and thank you all so much for responding promptly to the survey questions that were sent to you so that we can provide the update that we've discussed at recent meetings to ensure that we are striving for the diversity that we are required to have, some of the requirements by state statute and some by our operating procedures as determined to be desirable by our board. So the result of that is we currently have 10 members, and we just got in the last responses. I think it was late yesterday, so we don't have any visuals, but I'll summarize. As far as the number of people, the minorities, we have no minority, no Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. That's exclusive of race. We have none of those. We have 10, all 10 are white. So we need to strive for more racial diversity. We currently have 9 men and 1 woman. We are certainly meeting our requirements for elderly, which is 60 years as defined by the Florida statutes. And we currently have 7 out of 10 of our members are elderly. As I said, 7 are in their 60s. We have 1 in their 50s, 1 in their 40s, and 1 in their 30s. Handicapped is the other category that is required by the Florida statute. And we have 1 person who has identified themselves as being in the category of people with disabilities as defined by the ADA definition of having a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So we do have one person that qualifies for that. Additionally, the TPA board has nominated, or nominations are encouraged to promote representation in the following categories. Environmental issues, we have 4 of you who have identified in that category. Business interest, 2 of you have identified as business interest. Construction and development industry, 3 of you have identified as representing that industry. Well, 1 of you has identified as freight and goods movement industry. We have no current representatives for the private transportation providers. And we have 8 of you have identified as representing the general public. So with that, I'll take any questions. I will mention that for those board members that do have the opportunities to make nominations, this information will be provided to them, and with the encouragement that they try to select nominees that will help fill the voids that we have.
Mr. Chair, I do have 2 hands raised, one from Myron and the second from Terry.
Myron, why don't you go first?
Well, my hand was raised just to ask about the report which Melissa just gave, whether we were going to get it. And she gave it orally. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
then the next is Terry.
Yes, I just have a quick question on number 3, the Lantana interchange improvements. Does anyone have a memory of how long ago it was that they just completed their improvements at that location? It's only been a couple of years, as I recall, although I'm straining my brain to find out exactly how long ago it was. They put in a new ramp and they widened some of the lanes. Hello?
Jason?
Yeah, I can look into it for you and find out the history.
Yeah, I'm
of
just
it.
wondering if we're talking about long-term planning, if it lasts a couple of years, they're spending all these millions of dollars. They did Woolbright within a couple of years of each other. They did 2, right? At Woolbright Road? I mean, what kind of planning occurs? Is this considered short-term?
This is Andrew Euler with CPA. I could try to answer that. I don't know specifically on this one, but typically they do those short-term improvements and they come back with the ultimates. So you'll see that on a lot of interchanges on 95 here in the county where they'll do those, maybe just adding additional acceleration lane or on-ramp and then, or
Yeah.
turn lane.
Well, the
and then come back.
Woolbright one took almost 5 years and now they're doing it again. So, I mean, why don't they just plan on doing it all at once? They know there's going to be traffic flow and increased population. I'm just trying to figure out what the engineers are looking at. But you can get back to me if you want. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
I see no other hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. The item 2A has been deferred to the January meeting due to lack of quorum. 2B, we're going to do the airport presentation at this point. Because, okay.
We're
So
at
we-
the
that what
action.
we're going to do. Marjorie? Jason,
Okay.
are we ready for that, or should we do talk about Amendment 2?
Mr. Chair, we can move forward with information item for the Palm Beach County airports. We
Okay,
do have
great.
Gary present to make that presentation.
Yes, would Gary Spinnick, Deputy Director of Airports, present, please?
Sure. Jason, do I have control of the presentation?
Yes, Gary, you will need to
Okay.
click on the screen to accept control, and then you should be able to use your arrow keys to move forward and backwards.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Sipek. I'm the Deputy Director of Airports for the Palm Beach County Department of Airports, primarily in charge of airport development for the county's 4 airports. And what I've been asked to do today is to provide to you a brief summary of what is going on at the county's airports, how we're doing, how we're faring through this pandemic, some of the projects we still have ongoing or we plan to complete in the near future, and just some of the steps we've taken to ensure the traveling public is safe here at especially Palm Beach International Airport. For those of you that don't know, the county owns and operates 4 airports, Palm Beach International Airport and 3 general aviation facilities, North Palm Beach County General Aviation Airport, Palm Beach County Park Airport or Lantana Airport, and Palm Beach County Glades Airport in Pahokee. Everything we do is established, all of our policies and procedures are established by the Board of County Commissioners, and we operate as an enterprise fund, which means that we don't utilize any ad valorem taxes from the county themselves or directly. Operations are all funded by user fees to airlines, businesses, and passengers. And most of our development is funded through federal and state grants, passenger facility charges, revenue bonds, and airport revenues primarily. So starting out this year, back in February of 2020, we ended our 12 months with our strongest growth in passengers coming through the airport at close to 7 million. This was great for us. Everything was looking up. At the end of February, we built our capital budget for fiscal year 21, which looked very promising with a lot of projects, a lot of help and state funding coming from FDOT for a lot of our projects, FDOT support, FAA support, as well as a pretty hardy passenger facility charge program that we have here. For those of you that don't know what the passenger facility charge is, if you look on a ticket, if you travel out of Palm Beach International, you'll see on the bottom, it says PFC, $4.50. That's something that we go through with approval from the FAA and from the air carriers here at PBI to collect that charge for every passenger that leaves here. That $4.50 is a very big funding source for us for many of our capital projects. As you know, in mid-March, we started to see some significant and severe declines in our passenger traffic. We started to see some progress back in May and June after bottoming out in April. I believe there was one day in early May that we had approximately 380 passengers going through our checkpoint. Actually, that's total people going through the checkpoint. Take off a couple of employees here and there that have to go out on the concourses. So roughly we had 300 people going out of our airport in early May. That's equivalent to basically not even 2 planefuls of people in one day in early May. So we took some drastic hits. At one point, our traffic levels were down almost 98%. We've slowly crept up here and there. Like I said, back in the May, June timeframe, we saw some increases, but once the travel restrictions went into effect in the Northeast in June, we started to see, and the surge in COVID cases again in July, we started to see that kind of stagnant level again of travelers leaving Palm Beach or coming to Palm Beach. We've seen significant reductions in the capacity and the number of nonstop destinations by our air carriers. Some of that's coming back now. We have received some new service. If anyone needs to travel out to Los Angeles, we do have direct service from PBI to Los Angeles on JetBlue now, along with a couple of other new routes that have popped up here and there over the last couple of months. As of now, our senior staff, I mean, we've gone through different scenarios, high level, low level, mid-level scenarios. They seem to change every day on when we think we'll get back up to the 2019 traffic levels. And as of right now, we're thinking it's going to be very slow depending on what happens with the vaccine, how willing people are to get back in aircraft and feel safe again to travel. But right now we're thinking about 2023 to 2024 is when we'll get back up to those 7 million total passengers for the annual passengers that we have. The next couple of charts are just showing you what our monthly total passengers are, calendar year 2020 versus calendar year 2019. You can see in April in this chart where we bottomed out, it really had very few people traveling as was the case throughout the US. You can see in this also that increase in May and June, and then kind of the stagnant, just a flat line from June, July, and August Did see some additional growth in September and October, but not near what we typically do, especially in like the November timeframe. September is always our slowest month here. Kids are going back to school. Folks aren't traveling as much. So you don't see, I mean, we did have a major reduction this year, but coming now when we start to see that the people travel for the holidays, Thanksgiving, we did not see what we typically do last week during Thanksgiving. We had hoped for a much more robust travel week last week. It was better than it has been in the last couple of weeks, but not nearly what it has been in the past couple of years. In terms of operations, you can see the same thing, a bottoming out in April. Back in June, our general aviation tenants on the south side saw some tremendous activity levels, probably better than they've seen in many, many years here. But then that also it brought us closer to what we normally do for our aircraft operations in the month of June. But then it started to tail off again in the July, August, September timeframe. Starting to see some of that come back now as air carriers put more capacity and more aircraft into the system as people start to fly again and hopefully continue to fly over the holidays. This graphic shows you kind of what I was talking about earlier about the daily throughput through our checkpoints, through our security checkpoints, and just gives you a visual from December 1st of last year until November 30th of this year. And you can see some of those highlights. Back on January 3rd, we had a really high throughput through the checkpoint, close to 19,000 people, I believe. And you can see the ups and downs throughout the month of February. And then once you saw those initial Florida COVID cases start to rise, you really saw that downturn and people leaving and getting on planes and leaving Florida or leaving Palm Beach. Dropped out, you can see that April, May timeframe. I mean, we really had no traffic here. For those of you that utilize Palm Beach, and hopefully most of you do, we do have a pretty busy concourse, two concourses and a terminal when in those months of February, March timeframe. But that seemed to go away, and it was basically a ghost town. I mean, it was kind of eerie walking through the terminal and not having anybody there except for a few employees and some cleaning folks, making sure that we were doing what we could to stay open and keep aircraft coming to our gates and being able to service them. So before COVID hit, this was our basic service, and I'm just showing you this graphic to show you what the impacts are to the travel restrictions in the Northeast. We had 37 destinations with 12 airlines serving those destinations, with approximately 109 daily departures out of Palm Beach. Once again, I said we served near more than 7 million total passengers in those 12 months ending February 2020. And as you can see, the Northeast region, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Philadelphia, the DC area, that's our primary market and has been for years. So when these travel restrictions went into place, that's what our major impact is. Until some of those are relaxed and people feel comfortable flying to those areas and those areas flying down to Florida now, we don't think we'll see the growth in our traffic or the increase in our traffic, our passenger traffic, until those restrictions are lifted. This is a graphic that I borrowed from the Airlines for America website. It's a group that represents the air carriers in the US. And off to the side here, you can see this was for November 20th, or November of 2020 versus November of 2019. The areas that are seeing the largest air service reductions, and you can see the Washington, DC area, New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, those are all they've had the highest reductions in the service, the air service up to those areas, which impacts us greatly and reduces the amount of traffic that we have here at PBI. So this is basically just an overview of some of the operational and financial impacts that we've gone through. It's estimated that the US airports are facing $23 billion in operating losses as a result of this pandemic so far. And some of this information is a little bit dated now over the last couple of months. It's probably even more than that now, as we don't see that return to normal levels and a continued loss of passenger service right now. But all of our revenue streams, from parking to concessions to passenger facility charges, everything is impacted. Everything that we make money on is impacted here at the airport. So what have we done to kind of combat that and mitigate some of those impacts? One of the first things that we did in our response to COVID back in early March, our director, Laura Beebe, who's our new director, taking over for Bruce Pelly, who retired back in December of 2018. We've separated our staff. We've reallocated staff to different areas of the airport. Typically, before COVID, all of our operations staff worked in one area. Our maintenance staff worked in one area in the maintenance compound here at the airport. We broke those staffs, and as well as our communication center staff, up into different teams and actually physically separated them in different areas of the airport, so that if one person came down with the COVID, it didn't take out our entire operation. The different teams could still handle operating the airport. Some of our administrative staff here in our building, building 846, if anybody's been over here to our admin facility, some of those people, most people here have offices. We've been here since the beginning. Only a couple people went home based on some of the guidance from the county government. But other than that, we've been here working all day, or working every day since it started, to make sure that the airport is up and operational. We've reduced our fiscal year 21 budget. We've closed temporarily some of our facilities. Some of the parking facilities were closed. Our long-term lot does not have shuttle service. You can still park there, but you have to walk over. We've also delayed filling vacant positions. A lot of these things just to try and ease the financial burden that we have because there's no revenues coming in. So as I said before, this is a graphic that was taken from one of our audit financial statements that shows kind of the breakdown of where all of our airport revenues come from. And as you can see, the passenger facility charges, the concessions, and the car rentals and parking make up more than half of what our revenue sources are. And back in April and May, these were basically non-existent. There was no one parking in our parking garages. In fact, as I said earlier, we closed several of them because there was no demand. The car rentals, no one was here. There were no passengers here renting cars. Our concessions were virtually closed. Maybe one or two of them were open for very limited hours because there were no passengers there. And with no passengers, we could not collect the passenger facility charges to fund all of our projects in the future. So as you can see, I mean, we've taken a drastic hit here. Until those passengers start coming back and flying, we'll continue to make changes and adjust as we need to. And just to touch on this a little bit, we did develop a plan. This is on our website at pbia.org if anyone wants to look at it. Basically developed a document telling everyone who's traveling into Palm Beach, here are the things that we're doing. We've installed transmission barriers at the ticket counters and at the gates. We've enhanced all of our cleaning and sanitation protocols. We've provided safety messaging, everything on the floor like you see at stores and the mall or anywhere you go now. There's overhead announcements, social media. Our marketing director provides social media updates basically daily. Like I said, if you want to look through this, it's roughly a 28, 30-page document of everything that we've done and the different things that we continue to do to make the traveling public feel safe. One thing that I will say is we were the first airport in the state of Florida to achieve the Global Biorisk Advisory Council STAR accreditation, second airport in the country. This was an accreditation program that we went through back in the summertime to kind of show everybody and showcase the things that we do, all of our protocols that we use here at PBIA. I know several of the other Tourist Development Council and Discover the Palm Beaches, they're working in conjunction with a lot of they're working with the convention center and several of the hotels in the area too to achieve this accreditation as well. So we're very proud of that, and our staff are helping us out with achieving that. So some of the projects that we have ongoing right now, as I said earlier, we basically revamped our entire fiscal year 21 budget. We had just finished putting together, as I said, a very robust budget, knowing that we had great revenue sources coming in. Our passenger levels really helped us out with that back in February and early March. And I think it was about 2 weeks prior to the onset of COVID that we submitted everything. I submitted everything for our planning and development group for the projects that were upcoming. And then we basically did a pivot and sat down with FDOT and some of the funds that we were getting from FDOT and really reworked our entire program so that we really focused on safety, security, and the preservation of our facility here at PBIA primarily. So where we had some taxiway connector, new projects that were going to enhance some of our facilities out on the airfield, we really took a step back and really reprogrammed those funds for things that needed to be done inside the terminal. And one of the biggest ones we have is the terminal roof improvements, the replacement of our roof over the terminal. Also, we have a mitigation program going on right now to deal with some terminal condensation and moisture that's getting inside of the facility as well. Our escalators and elevators, most of them are the original construction from back in 1988. The public address system replacement, that's an ongoing project right now. I believe we have almost 2,500 speakers in the ceiling right now that needed to be replaced. Without that, our air carriers cannot make the announcements at the gates. It's been a failing system for several years now. So these are the types of things that we need to work on now to ensure that our facility is up and operational. The Central Airfields Improvement Project, that's a large scale pavement rehab project that needs to be done down on the southern portion and the central portion of our airfield. Right now, it's about a $30 million rehab and reconstruction of our airfield pavements. So that will be going out on the street, hopefully sometime in the spring for bidding. HVAC improvements continue within our facility. We really need to take care of those. I mean, it's basically in conjunction with some of the condensation that we have in the terminal as well. The last couple of projects that we have been looking at for a couple of years now, the planning for new facilities, a new Federal Inspection Services facility inside the terminal, as well as a new general aviation FIS facility down on the south side. Our aging aircraft rescue and firefighting facility, we are doing a kind of a Band-Aid fix on that facility that sits out in the middle of the airfield just off the end of the concourses now. We will be we're starting the design on a brand new facility that will be just to the south of the new air traffic control tower on the north side of the field, as well as some planning for a new airport maintenance facility. Right now, all of our maintenance functions are housed in old county buildings just to the west of the existing air traffic control tower on the north side up here on Belvedere Road. We're having plans to move them across the street on the north side of Belvedere on some property that we own. A lot of these projects, though, are all contingent upon available funding. Many of these projects are multi-million-dollar projects. These new facilities that I just talked about, the FIS facilities, the ARF facility, and the new maintenance facility, they may be planned for and had schematic design done on them, but then they may sit on the shelf for a couple years until we get out of this pandemic and we kind of regroup financially on where we stand with our budget. The last project on this list is very important to us. This has been a project that's been ongoing in the planning stages for several years. This is our Concourse B expansion. Many of you may ask, why are you expanding a concourse while the passenger levels are down? This is our opportunity now to actually go through the design process for this Concourse B expansion. Before the pandemic hit, we were behind the 8 ball already at the end of Concourse B. If anybody has flown out on an American flight recently or pre-March, you would have seen that American has multiple departures and arrivals at the same time. The end of Concourse B is very congested, much like the end of Concourse C was before we made that expansion back in 2007, 2008. So this is our opportunity now to get in there while our passenger levels are down, to really have this in place so that we can design, build, and have it in place in the 2023, 2024 timeframe when our passenger levels get back up and people feel more comfortable with coming back to PBI and not having to be crammed into a small space with hundreds of other people sitting around them. This Concourse B expansion, we got a lot of funding from FDOT through the SIS funds that we've competed for with other transportation modes, other airports, ports throughout the state. So that has been in the process for probably 5 to 7 years now, and we were successful in getting our first portion of that funding last year, and the second funding is coming this year. I believe it was a total of $15 million toward that project. So we are very thankful for FDOT's support on that. They're still supportive of that and understand our need to move forward with that project at this time. At our general aviation airports, Lantana, North County, and Pahokee, we do have several projects going on there. As you can see from this list, the top one is a noise study that's being done. We have some noise issues down in the surrounding communities around Lantana Airport that we're hoping to deal with through this multi-year process called the Part 150 study. Also, we have a new fuel farm and wash rack that's being constructed down there right now. Right now, the old fuel farm that was down there was demoed probably 5 or 6 years ago, and they've been using trucks to fuel aircraft down there. This will provide a self-serve, pretty much gas station down there for aircraft on the apron down at Lantana. And the other projects there is an apron rehab at Lantana Airport. We're going to make some improvements to the security fence all the way around the airport, as well as a rehabilitation on our noise abatement runway 422 at Lantana. We're also in the environmental assessment phase of an extension to the crosswind runway at North Palm Beach County General Aviation Airport. That's a project that's been in the works for several years. We have an interlocal agreement with the City of Palm Beach Gardens supporting that as well. That's been something, like I said, has been ongoing for probably 6 or 7 years. We've been talking with them, and now we're going through the environmental assessment to gain NEPA approval from the FAA on that extension of that runway. We also have an apron expansion project going on up there at North County, as well as a rehab of the south runway 9 right 27 left as well. And finally, a rehab of runway 1836 at the single runway, the sole runway at Pahokee Airport as well. So really, it's just the projects that are needed to maintain the efficient and efficient operation of our airfields at the general aviation airports. So doing through all of the COVID activity that we've had over the last 9 months, we have still been able to be recognized by several different travel and leisure magazines and different travel publications. And probably the most important to us is being ranked the 3rd best airport in the US in Condé Nast Reader's Choice Award. So the others are great too, but having that being the 3rd best out of all airports, not just medium, small, large. We are a medium-sized airport, but being the 3rd best airport in the US is really something that we like to hang our hat on. And I believe with that, I will finish my presentation and open it up to any questions.
Are there any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Committee members, do you have any comments? Please raise your hand if you have a comment.
I don't see any hands raised, Mr. Chair. Oh, Myron raised his hand.
Myron?
I'd like to thank you all for this presentation. I found it very interesting. I'm the person who requested it, so
I hope it met your needs.
Yes. What about the level of activity at the general aviation airports, the 3 little ones? I mean, has that slowed as well?
It hasn't, not like the air carriers here at PBI. Like I said, even the general aviation, for most of you might not know this, but Palm Beach, the majority of our operations are general aviation. 65% of the total operations are by the I don't want to say the small guys, because they're not very small, some of the private aircraft that are down on the south side. But they came back, they're going to come back a lot quicker than the air carriers are. But the same holds true for the general aviation airports. I think all of our general aviation airports saw a modest increase, or a pretty substantial increase, I should say, in June, but they seem to be back up running normal operations. I think over this past weekend, we saw a lot of general aviation activity here at Palm Beach as well, especially leaving over the Thanksgiving weekend on Sunday. So they're doing well, more so, or much better than the air carriers are.
What about the flight school operations?
They're continuing. They haven't really missed a beat, especially Lantana. I mean, and that's one of the things that feeds into our Part 150 noise study down at Lantana. They're doing what they need to do. They really haven't slowed down a lot. I know there was a question early on in the pandemic, and some of the executive orders that came out was people didn't want to see all the flight schools still operating. It wasn't just here in Palm Beach County, it was throughout the state and throughout the country, I believe, that why is flight training an essential service? And it was deemed that, and we got several comments on that, but they kept moving along. They did what they needed to do. And we're happy for it because if they're still up and operational, then they're paying their bills, and we're whoever's leasing land or the tenants that are leasing at the FBOs down at the GA airports are paying their bills to us. So
Can you remind us of what flight schools there are here?
I mean, we have several fixed wing and helicopter. I mean, down at I don't have all of their names in front of me right now.
We don't need the names, just, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they're mostly down at Lantana. I mean, there are a couple of helicopter flight schools, and that's really what the driving force behind our Part 150 is. I mean, we've had some issues with low flying helicopters and different aircraft in the pattern at the same time. So those are some of the things that we're hoping to bring the community together to and the users down there, the actual pilots and the flight schools, so that we can come up with an agreement and some cooperation between the communities and the users there.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
It relates to the fact that President Trump will no longer be president as of January 20th. When he came down as president, Lantana basically closed. What effect will him no longer being president? Does the same level of security be required as an ex-president?
We're waiting for that answer, just like everyone else is at this point. It's come up in quite a few of our meetings to try and determine. We hope that that is not the case, that Lantana is not closed when he's in residence at Mar-a-Lago after he's no longer the president. But all that's yet to be determined.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'd like to personally thank you for your presentation. I thought it was
Mr. Chair,
Down here.
I'm sorry. I
Terry
do have
Brown
Terry
here.
Brown with his hand
Just
raised.
just a quick question regarding the Boca Raton Airport at FAU. Well, do you have staff down there?
We don't. That is not owned and operated by Palm Beach County.
And it's a separate airport authority?
Correct.
Yeah, so it doesn't conflict or interfere with anything that you folks do?
It does not.
It's just the air traffic control is separate?
Air traffic control is separate, correct. They have their own tower down there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? All right, if not, we'd like to thank you for your presentation. I thought it was excellent and it was very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. Okay, moving on. We have a motion to recommend adoption of Amendment 2. Now, we're going to present the item, but we are not going to vote on it. This is okay. So Jason, please present item B, 2B.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to present to you a handful of projects. There's a total of 5 projects part of this amendment. I'll go through each one individually. The first project is I-95 at North Lake Boulevard. You can see on the screen here, there's several of the financial changes, and for the most part, this is a consolidation of 2 projects, putting them together with a resurfacing project. And you'll notice by the length of the project that this will increase the length of the project, as it is yeah. So it's just the combination of 2 projects, and one of them being a resurfacing project. The next project is a bridge replacement project for Earman River Bridge. So for this project, it was determined that additional right-of-way needed to be acquired in order for a couple of different reasons. It was the acquisition of private property in order to do construction, and I think adding like a barrier wall or riprap around the bridge. So That's why you see the additional right-of-way phases that were added to the project in order to acquire the land for the bridge. The next three projects are new proposed projects that were added to the TIP recently. These first two projects, the first project is a lighting project, and as well as the second one. However, the second one has some nuances where this was kind of spearheaded and working with the city of West Palm Beach and their Vision Zero action plan. And through that effort, they determined to be able to add lighting to the Broadway Avenue from 45th Street to 59th Street. The third project here is a little different. It's a rail safety project, but it is being built by Brightline with additional SU funds to support a CRISI grant. So in total, there's 5 projects. 3 of them are new projects. For a combination of 5 projects for this particular amendment. If there's any questions, I can answer them.
Okay. Before we do that, staff, are there any public comments on this issue?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any comments?
I don't see any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Then we'll move on to 3A. For East Coast Railway Passenger Rail Agreements Update. Jessica Jocelyn, TPA consultant from Kittleson and Associates, will present this project.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. All right. So I'm here today, as it says in your agenda, to talk about some research we did at the request of your board back in September to look at all of the Brightline station agreements along the Florida East Coast Railway. Oops. Thank you. Okay, so starting with a summary of what we researched. So there are 18 projects that we researched in relation to ongoing Brightline related discussions. As you can see, we categorize them into 3 different categories. The first set of 8 is existing and under construction stations and connections. And when you see the word connection, that's related to any railway that is being constructed or planned to be used to connect where Tri-Rail runs on the CSX tracks closer to I-95 to the FEC tracks closer to US 1 Dixie Highway area. So there's 8 there that I'll walk through. The second category is stations currently under negotiation or in discussion. And there are 2 main categories there. The first being the SMART plan standing for Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan down in Miami-Dade County. There are 6 stations that are currently in discussion in that area. And then the other is a station in the Port of Miami, or as they refer to themselves, Port Miami. And then the last category we researched is future locations of interest for stations and connections. And this was kind of a larger area where we looked at the Treasure Coast and then also Broward County. And there was one connection, again, between the CSX and FEC corridors in Pompano that we looked at. So diving into the details, starting with the existing and under construction stations. The first is one you're probably most familiar with, and that's the constructed and in operation West Palm Beach Brightline Station. And when I say in operation, this is pre-COVID days. I know with COVID, things are a bit different, but hopefully things will go back to normal. But here, just wanted to note that Brightline did purchase the land for $3.8 million. Brightline did receive tax credits and development bonuses as part of this station development, if you weren't aware. And as you know, as I've been saying, we have ridden on the system and we know development's going on. So this one is moving along. Now moving to Boca Raton, which has not yet been built. This is about a $46 million project. And of the stations that we do have agreements for, the range of these stations is 50 to 70 million, give or take, depending how many additional elements are part of the station. If there's a pedestrian bridge or an access road or additional railway tracks that need to be built, it does vary the price. In terms of city contributions, there was a DOT grant as part of this, if you aren't aware, in the 16.35 million range. And there is a lease agreement underway. I was told this morning by the Technical Advisory Committee that the development agreement is still underway. So we're considering this under construction, ready to go, but there is that one piece remaining before they officially continue to break ground on this station. For Fort Lauderdale, there's not a lot of financial information that we're able to share with you or your board on the 17th, but we just did want to recognize, we know it's there, we know it's constructed and existing, and did want to note that there's a pretty substantial park and ride lot facility that was built as part of the station, and that it is adjacent to the Broward County Transit Terminal. Next is the currently under construction Aventura station. This is towards that higher end, coming in at about $76.7 million total cost. And that's because of a pedestrian bridge that is part of the agreement. There's actually two agreements. One is to build the pedestrian bridge, and then one is to build the station. The pedestrian bridge, if you're not familiar with this area, is going to connect the station, which is on the west side of US 1, to the Aventura Mall area on the east side of US 1. That facility is pretty large, high speed, so they wanted to make sure people could safely connect to and from. I did want to note here in this negotiation, the county did authorize a 3-acre property acquisition for about $18 million, including closing costs at about $1.3 million. And then the county also agreed to fund up to $57.4 million for the construction of the station and infrastructure. You're probably wondering, where did they get $76.7 million? They got it from their surtax, their People Transportation Plan tax that they passed decades ago. So they did approve the funding to go towards this. And it was pretty neat to see that they actually expect a return on investment of $90.8 million a year. When the site is up and running, and they're expecting about 400 jobs for the construction. So they thought it was a good deal to spend that money up front. Now the next is the downtown Miami station known as Miami Central Station. If you haven't been, I encourage you to go. It's a beautiful station when everything's up and running. Similar to West Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale, the land was purchased or owned by Brightline, so there's not a lease agreement, if you will. But I did want to note, even though we don't have the financial costs that Brightline spent for their portion, that it does include 5 tracks at this station, 3 serving Brightline and 2 that will ultimately serve Tri-Rail. And for those that haven't gone to the station, there is a large mixed-use development as part of this, which I'm sure was very desirable for Brightline to build this station. It's a 9-acre complex, and as you can see there, the mixed use includes residential, office, commercial, and retail. And you're probably wondering, well, what's going on with the Tri-Rail station at downtown Miami? So we have a separate slide for this because it is a separate component of the station for Tri-Rail. And we do have the financial information for this. So Tri-Rail spent almost $50 million for improvements to expand their tracks at this station. And they also spent about $16.2 million for trackage improvements. I'm going to talk about the Iris connection to allow Tri-Rail to go from the CSX line into the FEC tracks and into the station. So here, as you note, there are 2 agreements between Tri-Rail and Brightline. And I did want to note that they are not operating yet. Tri-Rail has fulfilled all of their ends of the bargain, if you will. They've done all the upgrades, they've given the money, but we are waiting on Brightline to finish some of the elements of the agreement that I'll talk about in a moment. But before talking about that, I wanted to jump now to the connections, but starting at the north end, so jumping back into Palm Beach. The Northwood connection that you may be familiar with north of downtown. We just wanted to note, in case folks were not up to date on what's happening, the Northwood connection was constructed. The partners were FDOT, SFRTA, the Florida East Coast Railroad, and then CSX. In terms of funding, we were able to identify the Tiger Grant amount that went into constructing the crossover, and also noted that SFRTA did contribute millions of dollars as well. I don't have the total figure. I'll have that later on when the report is finished. We're still working with FDOT on that. But I did want to note, although it's constructed, it is not operational. So not a lot of movement going on, but it's considered an active rail line, and it has been constructed. So that's great to see. Now jumping back down to Miami, as I was talking about Tri-Rail. So specifically, I just wanted to note that the reason Tri-Rail is not yet going into downtown Miami, COVID aside, is positive train control. And those are safety features that the Federal Rail Administration has required to be implemented from a technology standpoint into the rail system. Tri-Rail has done PTC for their portion and are waiting on Brightline to move forward with theirs in order for them to be welcomed into the station. And Brightline does have to formally invite them in as part of the agreement. So we do anticipate that happening. We just aren't sure yet on a timeline. So now going into the stations actively under negotiation and discussion. As I mentioned, the SMART plan, Northeast Corridor stations. So the Northeast Corridor is one of 6 corridors, if I have that number correct, of the entire SMART plan for Miami-Dade County. And the stations here, there are 6 of them between Aventura and downtown Miami, and they're listed there on the screen, starting at the FIU Biscayne Bay campus, down to the Wynwood Edgewater neighborhood in Miami. I did want to note that on November 20th, the Miami-Dade County Commission did approve the resolution where they agreed to a $12 million access fee to the FEC corridor and are making an initial payment of $50 million. The $50 million, of course, is not to fund 6 stations, but it's a good faith effort we're providing money, and we're going to start. The initial proposal for 5 stations, not 6, was $350 million. So again, we're in that 70 million kind of higher end of the range. So we'll see how that continues, but good news to see things approved even as late as November 20th. And then moving to the Port Miami station, the Brightline website does show that this is a station coming. So you would think it's all set, ready to go, but they're actually still in negotiations according to the Brightline representative that we are interacting with. And here you see some costs on the screen. It's at Terminal H in Port Miami on the western end of the port, where they do hope at the time Virgin Cruise Lines were going to come in and they were going to connect. I did not research the status of Virgin Cruise Lines, but we know Virgin pulled out of the trains. So we'll see how this continues along, but we don't have much information as of today how it's going. I just know it's under negotiation still. And then for the future locations, stations of interest. So for Treasure Coast, here we highlight Stewart, but actually Stewart and Fort Pierce both expressed interest to Brightline when Brightline reached out to ask for cities to express interest. But Stewart is, if we were to read the tea leaves, as Kim Delaney was saying this morning, it is likely Stewart, but we do still want to keep Fort Pierce on the table. If you weren't following the news, there was a lawsuit that occurred between Martin County and Brightline, and there was a settlement. We're getting the settlement information from Treasure Coast, and we'll include that in the report. But it did include splitting the cost of building at least one station, including safety upgrades and quiet zones they're looking at as well. And for Broward County, hot off the press, they are developing a memorandum of understanding as we speak between the county and the Florida Department of Transportation in terms of picking back up and resurrecting a study that had become dormant in the past for having rail through the county. And it became dormant specifically because of a river crossing in Fort Lauderdale, the New River. The city of Fort Lauderdale wanted a tunnel to go through the river to accommodate the rail, and it was not environmentally feasible because of all the construction and constraints in the area. The city kind of backed off of requiring a tunnel, and then the county got a ton of money through the surtax coming in, a ton of money being, I think, $350 million a year. So they want to start having the discussions again and see if there are other alternatives to getting across the river so that we can have more passenger train service through Broward County, connecting to you all, and then of course to Miami. And then for the Pompano Beach connection, there were some rumors, maybe you have heard that this was built. It was not built. The Pompano Beach area along Atlantic Boulevard was the desired location. They went into discussions and the property owner for one of the properties was not interested. So it became dormant. So FDOT has put this on hold and are happy to pick it back up should the stakeholders gain consensus and come to the table to want to move forward. So with that, this is just an FYI. The board is interested to hear what others have been doing, just so that if we continue to move forward station development, that we kind of all understand what we're doing and we're working together as a region as much as possible. So happy to take
Are there any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Committee members, does anybody have any comments or questions?
I do have Mike Fitzpatrick and Ryan Rossi have their hand raised.
Michael?
You can go first, Mike.
If Brightline goes bankrupt, what happens to all these interlocal agreements?
I did not research that and ask. I can dig into the legal agreements and see if there are clauses about that.
Are all these extra stations going to kill Tribal East or Coastal?
I can't speak as a representative to Tri-Rail, but kind of putting on my transportation planner hat, I see that they're a complementary service that they're trying to work together to provide more of the limited stop as Brightline and a bit more of a premium level service versus Tri-Rail that would be more frequent stops than what Brightline is providing.
Do you have any idea how much time will be added to get to Miami with all these additional stops?
That is a great question, and that question was actually asked this morning as well. We have not uncovered any recent operational analysis in terms of travel time, but that is something I am going to go back with the TPA staff and also Brightline to see if that's something that we want to explore and dig further on for any travel time adjustments, but that wasn't part of any of the research that I uncovered.
Okay, what's the holdup on making Northwood crossover operational? And, you know, what required to make it operational? And is there a plan to make it operational?
So I'm working with FDOT District 4 to get the final documentation on the details behind Northwood. I do not have the details that you're asking, so sorry, I don't have a lot of the answers to your very good questions, but when I get that information, I will share it back to you.
One of the main purposes of Northwood, wasn't it to transfer more cargo, trains to the west? Is there a holdup on that, or are the two companies having trouble, reaching an agreement, or?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure what the holdup is on the Northwood. I'd have to discuss that with the project manager at FDOT.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Great questions.
just have a question on the Boca station. I know that there's been delay. I think that originally they were supposed to break ground at some point this year. Obviously, that didn't happen. When do they anticipate actually breaking ground on that station?
That is another good question. So this morning at the TAC meeting, they did not provide a date, but they did correct me. I was implying in my words that it broke ground because there was a ceremonial, I believe, ribbon cutting, but he said it wasn't a true breakdown or groundbreaking where the land's cleared. And he said it's being held up because of this development agreement and did not share or even kind of give off a vibe that he knew when that would occur.
Oh, really? So there's no
They may
anticipated.
have a date, it just hasn't been shared yet. So I'm actually, because of the TAC meeting comments this morning, I am going to follow up. And if anyone on this group has any intel, I'm happy to take that and confirm it with the city.
And my second question,
Yeah.
Obviously, COVID has impacted a lot of the anticipated development with some of this. But I'm also curious, do you think that the Virgin pullout had an impact on some of these delays as well and getting some of these things off the ground, or is that just because of the year we've had? Or
My personal opinion is because it's the year we've had. In some of the literature I read, and again, these are news articles, some of what I'm reading, so you have to take some of it with a grain of salt, but that Virgin just didn't come to the table as they said they were.
Right.
So I think Brightline, they just parted ways and moved forward, but it didn't seem that impacted Brightline specifically to these stations maybe being delayed. I am completely speculating though, just for the record,
Okay.
based on what I was reading.
That's all I have. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions.
Any other questions or comments, members?
I don't
Yes,
see any other hands raised.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesselyn,
Thank
to
you.
make this presentation. It's very enlightening to understand exactly what's going to happen. Thank you. Next item is the listing of fiscal year 20 obligated projects. Jason, would you please present this item?
Hello again, everyone. So I'm going to briefly go over the FY 2020 annual list of obligated projects that is part of the Transportation Improvement Program. Just to begin, what the obligation report is the federal government's promise to pay back Florida for the federal share of a project's eligible cost. So what you'll see in the financial information is only the federal funds used to construct projects as opposed to the state funds that are also used. The first list here is a summary of all the projects within the TIP sections that make up the TIP document. So you can see the TIP sections on the left, how much was programmed in the TIP for each of those, and then moving to the right, the obligated amount that was actually spent and the difference. And the last column is the deobligated amounts, which are the funds that were not spent on the projects within those TIP sections. The next few slides are just the list of projects that we're highlighting that have a difference of 500,000 or more, either has been spent or not spent. So you can see from the first few several projects in this list here where there is a fiscal year 20 TIP request or the amount listed in the TIP, but there was money spent on the project as part of the obligations, and that's why there's significant differences. And this is there's a number of reasons for this. However, one that we saw as a common theme is the reimbursement of state funds, converting, getting federal funds back for state funds that were used to construct the project. So that's why you see no money was requested or listed in the tip. However, a considerable amount was spent on the project. And you can see these projects as they move through through previous tips, that these projects were in previous tips had requested amounts and were moving through their phases. And now you see that these funds are now being paid back or, recuperated by the state. This is just a continuation of the list. Like I said, it goes for the cutoff point for what we're highlighting is the $500,000 difference. And so progressively the differences go to the negative, which is for the funding difference, which will indicate that funds were programmed but unused. So there is a complete list in the agenda packet that lists out all of the projects from the FDOT obligated projects list. If there's any questions, I can take them at this time.
Okay. Are there any public comments on this subject?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any committee members' comments on this item?
I don't see any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason. We're now moving to administrative items. The summary points for the October 15th, 2020 governing board meeting. This is an informational item only. There is no staff presentation on this item unless requested by a committee member. Are there any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Are there any committee member requests? FDOT project schedule report. Again, this is an informational item only, no staff presentation. Are there any public comments on this item?
Mr. Chair, I do have that one of our deputy directors, Andrew Euler, has a comment, as well as Myron raised his hand.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll say a few things. Thank you, Margie. We actually, I'm sure Myron's going to want to talk about this one. You all requested, especially Myron, us to revamp this list to provide it based on our priorities as a TPA. So we received this scheduling report, which provides all the upcoming milestones for ongoing products. And we get this from FDOT, and we request it at the beginning of every month. And before we had a list for you all that was a larger list and sort of hard to read in areas and hard to find projects. So what we tried to do was consolidate the milestones into the ones that we felt were most useful for you all and for our other committees and board. And then we put them in our list of priority projects order. So what you see now is a revamped version. Hopefully it's more useful for you all. When you look at the list, you'll see ones that are grayed out in the dates. That means it's already passed. And then you'll also see ones that are bold, underlined, and in red. And those are upcoming dates within the next 3 months. So to sort of, focus your attention on ones that are upcoming soon. So hopefully you guys get more out of this. If you have any more feedback for us, we'd love to make it a more useful product for you all.
Myron?
My comment was to say thank you for, it's an improvement.
Thank you, Myron. Any other comments? We'll move on. The September 2020 and October 2020 Public Involvement Activity Report. Again, this is an informational item, no staff presentation. Are there any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any request by a committee member on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Seeing none, the 2021 TPA Governing Board and Advisory Committee meeting schedule. Again, an informational item, no staff presentation. Are there any public comments on this item?
No, Mr. Chair.
Moving on, the next meeting will be January 13th, 2021, which is the second Wednesday in January. Reason for this is that we were unable to have a vote on the number of items in this meeting, as well as we will have some FDOT presentations at the next meeting. Thank you for your patience with us as we conducted this meeting today. At this time, our committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.